In the finals of IEM Dallas, Stewie2k managed to outfrag Zywoo. So I wanted to take a look at this game because I've already done a video on Stewie, but that was one of his first games. I think that was literally his first game of the tournament, and this is his last Map 3 Nuke of the Grand Finals. And I also wanted to take a quick look at whether or not the call from Vitality in the last round was good, which I think, spoiler, I think it was a pretty good call, but it didn't work out. And I've seen people questioning it, and I want to explain why I think why it made a lot of sense. So here, you should be able to hear if Apex dropped onto Hut, so they've got some information as to what's going on. Stewie's just holding the push. This is often dangerous to play this static, but if you crouch as soon as they peek, then they might miss. And of course, Stewie probably knows his own limits if he generally wins that or not. Personally, I usually lose that. But his main thing is you got to be very careful. Whichever side you're not playing heavy out of, as in they're not playing heavy out of Hut, that side needs to make sure they don't die. Because if Stewie peeks too early there and he dies, that ends up being in a situation where they can just full focus on Squeaky and they're basically screwed. I think the one mistake you could say Stewie made here is he thinks that he's trying to play safe, and he thinks what it looks like is he thinks that he can see if they come out of heaven. He probably realistically did not want to allow this to happen because that's obviously a problem. And if he knew that he allowed that to happen, he would have jiggled to clear that left side instead of kind of just sitting there. And I think that's just another thing. Most of the mistakes you see from Stewie, in my opinion, are it's either kind of a semi-mistake where he's, just playing super safe, like overly safe, because he's not comfortable or he knows he's probably not going to win a gunfight. So he plays super safe, and that can be a problem. And the other one is sometimes just like small little things like that where he didn't probably realize that a player could have got past on the right timing, or he wouldn't have seen their head. Anyways, the main thing they really did use Stewie for, so this is why somewhat his stats were quite bad in this event, but why somewhat his stats are forgivable for sure, is partially because it was his first event in a long time, but he was used like this, where he's the first player in. Now, on this type of buy, if they're on USPs, this is just gonna farm kills. But if they're forcing, Nuke is a map where a lot of teams have been forcing recently, and if they're forcing, that's obviously not the greatest position to be in, the first player in, especially with a Mac 10. You can honestly, through Mini, you can sometimes lead in with an AK or a Galil, because you can lead in with that player to fight the players on Rafters or Top Hut, where an AK or Galil will have a huge advantage. And then you probably could have had Stewie go first after that. Like, you could have had him lead in to get into Mini, and then had an AK clear those, because if he was fighting against a Deagle in Rafters or Top Hut or something, he could lose that, but I don't think there's, any problem with that. He should probably win that most of it. It's hard to say. Is that like a 50-50 at like Rafters range? Well, his teammates would just swing in and trade, or swing in and like help him at that point if he doesn't just get 1D. So it's probably just fine. He probably doesn't lose that. I mean, here, generally, they really are using it. It's almost like the Freakazoid position, where it's like, in situations where the first player is likely to get a kill, a lot of the time he isn't the first player. But on a situation where the first player isn't likely to get a kill, he's almost always the first player. So he really is kind of used pretty sacrificially in these games, or just in the majority of this tournament. That's really what you expect, right? So here, Nexa dying in lobby, and people have talked about Nexa's performance in this event. It was below average. I think Nexa is quite underrated. He plays a little too passive, but I don't really know if that's maybe the team kind of calling for him to play more passive, because he's very often left completely alone on an island, has to survive or they lose, right? And more often than not, he does survive. He does a pretty solid job of staying alive. But in this case, Nexa dying in lobby is a big fucking problem, because then the CTs could be pushed into lobby, obviously, completely, and they could be stacking anything. So I really like that call where G2 kind of just freeze, because more likely than not, when they kill the player in lobby, what Vitality's probably going to do is they're going to start overstacking one side. They're either going to gamble upper or gamble lower. Oftentimes it'll be gambling upper. And then if you freeze, then you have to, the CTs have to respect that you could be going anywhere, and they're either going to get aggressive to take something back, which is what they did. They got aggressive through secret, or they're just going to gamble and hope that they're right. And they had a player walking up heaven to clear that out. So if the CTs were gambling, the player heaven would figure that out, and if the CTs weren't gambling, then they're going to get aggressive somewhere, and G2 just makes sure they're in perfect positions to prevent that type of aggression. So here, he actually does 70 damage to Spinx just with that little tiny spam, and doesn't give Spinx any opportunity to shoot back at him, which is what you want. I think by this point in the event, Stewie's aim was actually warming up. He was hitting some pretty solid shots, but just generally, you know, I feel like the CTs usually win that engagement in my experience, though I haven't done like a full-on analysis of like what does this look like at the pro level. Is jump keys not working? What does this look like at the pro level? Does Stewie usually win this? In my experience, I feel like the CTs usually win that peak, but usually only hold it with an op. So it's a nice little additional, tiny bit of additional damage just to spam that in a way that you're not going to get killed while spamming it. So here, that's like an old school flash, and that's like super old school where you flash that and fuck it up and blind yourself. That's like mega old school. Like we used to do that all the time back in my day. But fake upper hit, it's hard to, I can't see where Nico died. I don't know if it looked like they were trying to go at upper and maybe they canceled. The bomb dying in Squeaky is a pretty big deal, but they do have the player flanking heaven. So the main goal here is if they can prevent the CTs realizing that the flank is coming in time, then as soon as that flank makes contact, Stewie runs out, which is like perfect timing. So Stewie runs out as soon as contact is made so that that heaven player can accelerate, and the player is looking, or they're trying to contact on that heaven player. You don't give them time, because the CTs, what they want to do off that heaven contact, they either want to quickly kill that player, or they want to reposition where they can fight the Squeaky or Hut player and then the heaven player, right? They're either going to want to kill the heaven player instantly or reposition. So if you push out quickly, if you just accelerate off of that contact, that's going to give you a lot of potential advantage. And what I remember watching this because Stewie on his player cam is really confused after he dies, because Nexa is not out as fast as he expects, and really this should just be a round win. It's hard to say how should they have played this better. Okay, Nexa gets that kill, he looks around, he's mostly running knife out, he's just a tiny bit slower. He's just fraction of a second slower. And I don't know if you can even necessarily predict that. I mean, if he's just a tiny bit faster, then they win that round easily. But I remember looking at Stewie's player cam and he was like, what the fuck? Like, why is... The look was like, next, why aren't you trading already? Like, why aren't you already there? And I don't know. I don't know if Nexa really could have been much faster. Maybe he could have been half a second faster, which would have probably made the difference. But I don't know. It's really hard to say. I mean, the other option is Stewie tries to drop back into Hut, but I don't think that's a real option. I don't think Stewie dropping back into Hut there is a serious option, because that gives the player Rafters time to reposition, and then he's maybe in a better spot, and maybe Stewie dies going back into Hut. I don't think going back into Hut is a real option. I think Nexa just can be half a second faster, or if Stewie just doesn't like insta-die there, but he insta-died because it was a nice shot by Mezzy. Mezzy was on one in this final. He had one of the nice aces, you know, of the year at least, and just generally played quite well. I remember watching this round as well. This is a round that you don't really notice how big of an impact Stewie dying here has until you really look at it, because that's not a kill Stewie should be guaranteed. But I think if Stewie's in practice, if he's been playing for a while, Stewie definitely gets this kill. And if he gets this kill, this round's very different, because Mezzy survives for a while. That means the hit out of Hut gets delayed, and because the hit out of Hut gets delayed, Spinx is able to stop that, stop the player out of Squeaky, and then he's able to spin around, pivot, and get himself multiple kills, and the rotate gets there. If Stewie gets that entry, this round evaporates, right? Like the CTs just lose upper. And this game is probably, honestly, it felt like, I was thinking at the time that if Stewie gets that kill, they just destroy this game. Like, the CTs never get a foothold on, like, Vitality never gets a foothold on their CT side, and this ends up being a super one-sided third map. But because Stewie didn't get that kill, that player survives just long enough to prevent his team from actually to prevent G2 from doing what they want to do in this game. So here, Stewie lining up the outer smokes again, but this time, yeah, lobby gets destroyed. So they cancel the outer play, makes perfect sense. Then there's lots of options. You could try just going outer, but the CTs are going to be expecting that. If you have 3 players so close, going lobby makes perfect sense. Waiting out the smoke would be what I'd be thinking, but of course, CS is all about timings, right? And the CTs kind of have a timer in their mind whenever they do things like that. So one of the timers they're going to have is they're going to take lobby control, and one of the timers they'll have is how long does it take for them to get to lower? And they're going to try and beat that timer. Then they're going to be worried about, you know, because that's the main first response for the T's is going to be like, are we close enough? Can we just chase lower and like plant, right? And usually you'll have a setup like dealing with that. There's a lot of layers to this, but in theory, like if your opponents push heavy into lobby, you're thinking, can we get into lower or heaven before they can actually pivot back to control this? So the CTs are like, we got lobby, let's worry about these other options. And then afterwards, they're like, okay, let's make sure we're controlling lobby. So sometimes you want to catch a timing where it's like, the play itself isn't perfect if your opponents are ready for it, but the odds are not that high that your opponents are actually ready for it because of the situation, because they're worried about all these other plays. This is unlike the last one, unlike the last upper hit where Stewie didn't kill Spinks, but he dinked him last time as well. This time, this dink is like over-delivering. That dink is actually huge. He's not really expecting to get a dink there, and he does. Like, that's just doing really well. So, though Stewie had, you know, statistically not the greatest event, and by not the greatest, I mean, like, a pretty bad event statistically, he did more or less, I feel like, what was tasked of him. You know, he was the bait a lot of times, and a lot of times he did somewhat over-deliver on entry situations. And you can't really ask for too much more from Stewie, but more importantly, in key situations and key rounds, he did seem to show up really well in situations like that. Like, he's not really... I mean, Zywoo should have killed him. Like, Zywoo should not have given Stewie a chance to get a kill there, really. But he quickly turns back and gets himself a kill. He reacts quickly, he reacts correctly, and it just seemed like in big games and in big moments in those big games, Stewie generally did really well, which is probably why he had that response he had to Richard Lewis on Twitter. You know, I have my own thoughts about that. The problem with the Stewie response to Richard Lewis on Twitter is, the question is, was he defending Hooksy or was he defending himself? Because if he's defending Hooksy, he should be clear about it. And if he's defending himself, he should just let it go, you know? Here, I noticed, I'm pretty sure Hunter should be able to see if Mezzy is diffusing just from here, right? Like, if we just look at this, this was really odd. Don Hachi, I thought it was Hasi, but people keep calling it Hachi. I'm pretty sure he should see the wires if he's diffusing, right? Let's see. Yeah, he would 100% see the wires if he was diffusing. So, yeah, that's just a misplay from Hunter. It can be tough in those situations because you're not 100% sure if you can see the wires or not. So you're thinking, this is going to be embarrassing if I can't see the wires. So you're thinking, like, you're kind of giving it the benefit, right? Giving yourself a chance if you mess up. Anyways, here, Stewie just straight out of Squeaky, dies instantly. Guys, I think he could have gotten a kill there. What a noob. Oh my god, Stewie. What a noob. How do you die running through Squeaky through a smoke? That's crazy. Noob caliber gameplay, right? No. Anyways, I couldn't tell if Stewie was defending Hooksy when he made his tweet towards Richard, in which case I think he should have been direct, like, because an IGL's impact is more than just their actual games in the server. They're building out a system. They're showing, you know, his style of calling. You know, Nico can kind of play off of that a little bit. That he can see the way things are going, and they're kind of, I wouldn't say developing these players, right? But you know, putting them in the right situations, deciding who goes where and when, what kind of ethos you have. These are things that you could argue maybe that makes HooXi a good coach instead of IGL, whatever. But IGLs have more impact than just the games they're playing, right? So I thought that might be the reason that HooXi or that Stewie made his response. But he also could have just been defending his own play. And if he was defending his own play, I think his performance in big moments is, you know, probably what he was thinking about, or at least part of it. Here, Flames, really great peak from Flames, but, you know, this is a kill you want Stewie to be getting, right? That's not like a kill where Stewie has like a big advantage. Flames has just a really, really clean peak here. I'll show you this from Flames POV. He's clearing things really spectacularly, like, let's just be honest. And he hits a nice shot, right? But if you're Stewie, you want to be getting that kill. If you want to be getting that kill, oh god, what round was I even on? Yeah, if you're Stewie, you definitely want to be getting that kill. It's not the end of the world that he doesn't, but you definitely want to be getting that kill. In that case, there is 2 in lobby, which is great. But part of the thing is, I don't think Stewie is generally the second or the only lobby player when there is only 1 lobby, which means you could argue, I think, that he could be playing a slightly more passive position. Should he? No, I won't. No, I don't think so. I take that back. You definitely don't want Stewie making first contact there, though, if you can help it. But Nexa was in Hut, I think. So Nexa was more likely to make contact than Stewie. I mean, they have to get very aggressive to ever see Stewie in that situation. So I can see why, you know, he wasn't in like a crazy position. Oh, this is, okay, this is the same round. So you could argue he should have been back lobby instead of moving forward, or he could have been, maybe he could have been up here, which is, you know, a slightly more passive position. Because the problem is if he dies, then they know the setup. They know that that GT's playing 2 in lobby. But I think the main thing he has to be is he has to be in the best position for himself to get a kill. So if he feels like that's the best position for himself to stop a ramp push, then that's a position he should be in. You know, like, I think that's the main thing. I think the main thing is that he needs to be in his best spot to get a kill. And unfortunately, he didn't get the kill. So, was it his best spot? That's the question. Interesting flash. G2 must just throw that in, like, in some ramp rush or something, that flash. I'm not usually watching lobby players. I don't see that flash very often. But yeah, so when they're not going... This is another... I would have honestly really liked him to be here, but I think the problem with him being here in the previous round is that Nexa could have gotten flanked. But the thing is, if he's here, then, you know, if Flamesy's walking forward, maybe he thinks that it's just 1 lobby. I don't know. I would have to look at, I'd have to look at what setups teams play in lobby. But again, I don't think Stewie did anything wrong. I'm just wondering if there's a better thing that he could have done. Here, so again, it's clear that in a lot of these situations, this is like a spot where the first player is likely to get a kill. So guess who's going first? It's Nico, because Nico's likely to get a kill if he's the first player. And then Stewie can make sure he can get the trade if Nico doesn't get that kill, which is great. And then they're holding a push. Stewie seems to be struggling at like holding angles from these medium distances. This is a situation where I feel like if a rifler peeked him here, there's a good chance he would end up dying. But, you know, you can just try and not be in those situations. So here, you've got Vitality are triple stacked upper. And this is one of the problems generally with Nuke, is that more so than almost any other map, when it comes to Nuke, you can only tell if your opponents are stacked in an area once you walk into that area. It's like you almost have to be fully committed to that bomb site before you know they're stacked on that bomb site. And that makes Nuke like the prime situation for gamble stacks. And you'll see G2 do a good amount of gamble stacking. So Stewie, 4 kills on T side. He could have gotten 5 or 6, and then maybe if he got those kills, maybe he would have gotten like 7 or 8, right? Because they kind of compound. But he wasn't in position to get more than like he lost 1 or 2 duels that weren't even like bad duels. They were like, you know, you'd hope he could win those, but it's not that crazy that he doesn't. So he didn't really underdeliver much at all on T side. Then here, this is where I expect Stewie to do his worst, which is like pissing around where, you know, he's probably not been practicing too much. His aim is probably not quite as on point as he wants. And you can see he's messing around with the flash a little bit. I'm not sure if he's got like the perfect protocol on exactly where he wants that flash. I would expect that flash generally to be used for the upper retake, but they were holding upper, so maybe it was for an outer fight. He comes first out. Oi! Okay. He should have died. Okay, like, damn, Zywoo. Zywoo has missed more kills on Stewie that he should have got than Stewie has missed kills total, I think. He probably should be checking below him. I'm not sure why he didn't check below him there. Maybe he thought he heard a player move out of sight. I think he did see flames a little bit earlier, right? Like he saw a player just outside of sight. Maybe he assumed that was the bomb planter. But I'm still a little confused why he didn't check below him. He just dropped down. He's trying to be the bait there. But I think sometimes in trying to be the bait, you end up causing yourself your own problems. You try and be... You lose your opportunity to get kills that you should be getting, even if you're not playing too well. So, when I mentioned before about was Vitality's call in the last round a good call, you have to keep in mind what G2 is doing in upper. So first of all, G2 is playing Stewie and Hunter in upper, and G2 might be knowing that Stewie plays upper, and they might be trying to attack Stewie specifically. They're also playing lots of players in rafters, which is not that great against certain pushes. And by the way, in that hit, Stewie, I mean, I don't even need to say Stewie just did his job there. He did his job there, right? You're not expecting anything more, anything less. Maybe he could get 2, but it's not a mistake to get 1. That's the thing. I'm really looking for situations where Stewie messes up. If he could get more than 1 kill, but he only gets 1 and dinks the second guy, yeah, maybe Nico gets 2 there. Maybe a great player gets 2. But for his first event, you're only expecting him to get 1. So this is what playing rafters is really strong for. Stewie goes back from rafters to heaven and helps outer, and G2 love fighting outer. They love fighting outer on rounds where m0NESY isn't getting aggressive, because m0NESY is generally a very aggressive player, and m0NESY plays doubles up ramp, or G2 double up in ramp more than almost any other team. They double up ramp more than any other team I took notes of, which is Vitality, G2, FaZe, Na'Vi, and Mouse. They double up ramp more than anyone, which means they can... Well, part of m0NESY playing aggressive and m0NESY being an amazing opera on CT side is that you can play a little bit lighter on upper, which is really what G2 like to do. They play heavy on outer, they play heavy on ramp, and they play fairly light on upper. And not only is it light on upper, but I don't think this angle is all that strong, personally. It's fairly weak to mini if it gets flashed. It's if there's an upper hit coming in, he usually wants to be, he's either looking at mini or looking at hut or looking at, like, he's never going to be in a good situation to deal with everything. So this angle, I don't think is great against an actual hit, but it means that he can pivot back heaven if they need to help heaven, which is why I mentioned that like m0NESY likes to double ramp. That means that when m0NESY doubles ramp, maybe Hunter can pivot back heaven if he needs to, and they can pivot heaven when they want to be fighting heavy outer. So it's a great setup for having more mobility, but dealing with upper hits, I don't think it's the greatest setup. I think there are other setups that are probably slightly more effective. For an actual upper hit. Like if you're running out, this angle will typically deliver pretty strong, but it should generally only be getting like 1 or maybe 2. So here, Stewie is in great spot and he just survives. His main thing is he needs to apply enough pressure there that he does a really good job here too. He's got I mean, Zywoo should have killed him there again, by the way. Zywoo, yeah. I wasn't sure if Zywoo Zywoo's been struggling in finals, and I wasn't sure if Zywoo was like missing shots or if he just was like things were just going wrong. He's for sure missing some shots here. So Stewie wants to continue to apply pressure, especially because someone died, but it was Nico, and I'm certain that Vitality know that Nico is an outer player. And I like this play from G2, by the way, where they do send Nico upper in this case because G2 is often a little light on upper, and it's late in the round. putting him in upper is a great time to do it. And then you'll also notice, this is just the smallest thing, but I think these small things really make a big difference at this highest level. So Stewie could peek right or he could peek left, right? Here. He could peek right or he could peek left. Now, if he peeks left, Zywoo could be walking out this way and kills him, and then he, like, gets into sight and gets silo here. But if he peeks right, if Zywoo's in a position to kill Stewie when Stewie peeks from the right side, then Monacy's gonna get the kill. Like, Monacy's almost guaranteed a trade there. Is Stewie thinking about this? That's the question, because maybe I'm just giving you an extra reason that plays right, and maybe in Stewie's mind, all he's thinking about is, like, how do I make sure I get this kill? If he's got 100 health, I think he's just thinking, how do I make sure I get this kill? But he's on 10 health, I think then you might actually think about, like, how do I make sure that this kill is also traded? But regardless, a key note, I think, when it comes to this for the final round call is Nico was heaven late in the round. So Nico was, again, not in outer. And they were, sorry. Their upper hold wasn't that great because Hunter was rafters. He only got one. Stewie2k over-delivered from back silo. I mean, back silo is really strong, right? But if you're Vitality, you're thinking, oh, Stewie's not going to get 3 kills again, right? So they're probably thinking, we could attack Stewie. Nico wasn't outer, so they weren't ready for mini, even though I don't think Vitality came in mini. But they know in that case that Nico was not ready for mini. G2 was not, like, in position. Did they come in mini? Or did they just... I think they just came out squeaky, right? Fuck. I can't remember. Whatever. Nico was not outer, so they weren't ready for mini, whether Vitality went in mini or not. Hunter was rafters, which isn't great against mini. And then this is going to happen. This is the very next round. What is Stewie supposed to do here? Maybe he's probably got to do exactly what he's doing there, right? He's just got to be ready for this, and he's got to be checking Squeaky occasionally. Because if he's sitting in that spot and he's not ready for, and he doesn't check Squeaky once in a while, then someone could just walk out Squeaky and then see his gun and then just kill him for free, right? So he's basically in a terrible situation. If I went back, maybe I could, maybe there's a different way that could be played. Maybe he could have been in mini, but does he want to be in mini? Maybe they just play outside of upper that round and they play him in mini. That's what I'd say most teams would probably do. But Monacy, I think, was doubled ramp that round, wasn't he? I think they were just, I think that was just an awkward setup. Here, this is one where, yeah, this is not good. I think he's not super comfortable with that angle. Sphinx just runs out, destroys him. And then that's, again, the problem with that angle from Hunter. It's just not that good of an angle. It gets blinded by a shitload of positions. Yeah, Stewie's just, I'm going to put that one on Stewie. I think Stewie is too high up there. He needs to be a little bit further back. He needs to be a little more comfortable with that. But that angle from Hunter, you're just going to get blinded from basically everything. I'll show you this, by the way. If you didn't watch this one live, I do want to show you this one, because this shot from Apex is hilarious. Shit. And someone swinging out Squeaky. Even if you don't come in mini, someone swinging out Squeaky has a good angle on the guy there. So here, doesn't hit the shot on Monacy. Monacy fake runs away, jumps up. Monacy legs him, and Apex gets that kill. And if Monacy gets away, there's a good chance he gets that kill still. It's funny. He might even, if he knows he lagged them, which he probably does, he might have even just been pulling out his USP there. And he's like half a second. If Apex doesn't get that kill, he's almost definitely losing the round. That's crazy. It's crazy. So Stewie top hut dies in a situation where I think he probably shouldn't be dying, right? And so I can see that the urge from Vitality to want to attack Stewie in upper, especially because the other option is Nico in outer, who's having an insanely strong tournament, or ramp, where you gamble if Monacy's there, or Monacy could be outer, right? Like, so your options in this game, if you're trying to avoid, I mean, you know, you're probably not trying to avoid m0NESY and Nico. But if you're like not trying to walk directly into them, upper's a pretty good spot to hit, right? And Stewie is again in rafters. They're loving rafters so much. It gives you a lot. Rafters is great. It gives you a lot of ability to rotate around, but it's I think it's just weak to upper. I think G2 in general though plays fairly weak on upper more so than most teams. They're heavier on ramp. They're heavier on outer, which I like. I think you can play outside of upper a lot because if you're in a good setup, then you don't need to be heavy on upper at all times, right? If you're in a good set, when they go upper, you're in a good setup. That means that when sometimes you can be in a bad setup and it's fine. So here, Apex kills Hunter, which generally will suggest that Nico's still alive, but Nico could be ramp or he could be secret. Both are like could be ramp or could be outer. Both are reasonable. Here, I'm guessing they heard that. Yeah, Apex must have heard Stewie on the ladder, which is probably a sound. It's small, but probably he shouldn't make that because it looked like Apex was considering going ramp until he heard Stewie on that ladder, and then he decided not to go ramp. I think that's basically what happened, but maybe I'm wrong. But that ladder definitely is good. I mean, Apex could hear him running also, but you're not, especially in an arena situation, you're not at all guaranteed to hear Stewie running, right? He only made a few footsteps. You're not all guaranteed to hear that. But you are almost certainly going to hear the ladder, I feel like, unless the sounds are different in this game. I can't... the knowledge from CSGO and CS2, sometimes they overlap a little bit. So here, G2 wastes both mollies upper. They use both mollies upper early, which means they're not going to have a molly for late round, which means, you know, plays out of Squeaky and Hut are going to be a little bit stronger. Nico has, in previous rounds, been spamming outer and gone back down vents right afterwards. That's actually been their general play in these situations. So basically, by all means, Nico has generally been heavier towards outer and lower and not really been in position to help upper. Also, G2 started using their smokes upper very early in the round, so they're probably going to run out of them, because usually you kind of chain re-smokes on Squeaky until you're out of them. Their money's also not great, and after Vitality don't go outer, so I'm justifying the upper hit, after Vitality don't go heavy outer, where can they go? They can go ramp, where statistically G2 plays m0NESY a lot, right? They're doubled ramp a lot. So that's dangerous. Or they can go upper, where Stewie2k has been playing. Stewie2k's, he had a good hold one round, but he died in a situation he probably maybe shouldn't have died in one round as well. Generally, Nico's not been outer, but here's the problem. G2 gamble upper. They gamble off lower. They just gamble off lower here, and they do it correctly. That's the big problem. G2 just gamble off lower. And what is Zywoo supposed to do? Because maybe you could argue, maybe you could argue that maybe Vitality should have some idea maybe that G2 is going to gamble off lower here, because they do nade the outer smokes twice. So they wait. m0NESY's going to toss a nade. See nobody cross. Apex almost kills Nico. That would have changed the game. And then another nade. So in G2's mind, they're probably thinking, okay, this isn't a heavy outer cross. And when they think it's not a heavy outer cross, then you can gamble off lower sometimes, and it's not the end of the world. Because what's Vitality going to do? Right? If they didn't go heavy lower, is one guy going to go lower? Well, they're going to have to go... They're either going... That's probably why G2's doubled on ramp, because they, in their mind, might have enough information that this is max like 1, maybe 2, but usually, I don't think 2 is very common. Usually you either go 1 or like 3 or 4, right? Usually don't go 2 lower. I think, do you? I think you usually don't go 2 lower, but don't quote me on that. But either way, the team is going to have to go either re-smoke outer to cross again, or they're going to have to go ramp or down Squeaky. So you can gamble off lower here, and Zywoo is almost certain he's not going to walk the whole way. He's going to have to make noise at some point if he's going to go somewhere, right? He's going to have to break the window. Twist said on this broadcast that you can't hear the lower doors opening from upper anymore. I can't believe that's true. He might have been talking about you can't hear it from like lobby or something from like a different position, but it sounded like, I thought he said from upper, and I was like, I gotta test that. That doesn't sound true, but if that's true, then maybe you could, but generally, you're not going lower without making noise. Just to be clear, you're not going lower without making noise, and would he go lower? Because Monacy could just be sitting in secret with the op and kill him. So going lower is very risky. So going back upper makes a lot of sense, and Nico is ready for that. He knows, oh, Apex walked into mini and got a 2K that one round. This is the type of play they might run back on this round. This is the perfect sort of round where Apex might want to run that type of play back, right? So he's in the perfect situation, and this is the perfect situation. Flames, you could argue Flames should have waited for that smoke to go in mini, but that's not unintentional. It's not like Flames accidentally went in before the smoke, by the way. He went in intentionally before the smoke because that smoke is, as soon as that smoke lands, G2 is going to start pivoting to not die to mini. And so you try and go in slightly before that smoke. It's a risk, but if it works, you're more likely to catch the upper players off guard. And it didn't work. I think that was a good call from Nico, just in general. I think that was just a good call. I don't think there was anything wrong with the way Vitality played their call. I think G2 just had an idea that that might be happening, and based on the way they played with the double nades out on the outer smokes, they had a good, it wasn't like a random gamble. It was an intelligent gamble, and if things went wrong, they're 12-8 up, right? You can make some gambles at 12-8, and it's generally going to be a good idea. So overall, there's a couple rounds where Stewie lost some engagements he was like kind of 50-50 on that, you know, you would hope that he could win if he was more practiced. There's one or two rounds where he died where he probably shouldn't have died or probably should have got a kill before dying. And there was 3 rounds where Zywoo probably should have killed Stewie and didn't. so overall, Stewie better than Zywoo. Quote me on that. Don't quote me on that. Quote me on that.